this life ain't fair. And I know that you're going nowhere. Well, don't blame me for what you've done. Cause I know that you are having fun.
Welcome to the Clarified Realty Podcast, exposing the real estate secrets your agent doesn't want you to know. Here's your host, Tom Clary.
Well, don't you just walk away. That's when I'll say.
Welcome to the Clarified Realty Podcast. I'm Tom Clary, real estate agent licensed here in the currently cloudy yet still beautiful state of California. We just had a little drizzle of rain, a regular downpour for us, but things are drying up again. Thanks again for coming back. Also here is my sidekick / loan officer, Ron Bruno. Ron, how you doing today?
Fantastic. Cubbies are in the World Series.
Jesus, I knew that was going to be part of this. Oy, oy, oy. You know, for a guy who I am absolutely not even interested in sports, and I mean, there's not even like one little cell in me that is even remotely interested in sports, and somehow I still feel some sort of emotion for all the Cubs fans who have waited so long. I mean, I actually know that much about it that I can actually feel empathy and celebrate with you guys.
It's all because of a little goat. That's what it's all about.
I have no idea what that means, but go ahead.
Oh, you never heard about the Billy Goat?
No, tell me very quickly about the Billy Goat. We have a big podcast here, but I got to hear about a story about a goat.
Oh, okay, so the Billy Goat story is, I don't know the specific years, but essentially what happened was there was a proprietor of a bar, and he had a Billy Goat, and he brought this goat to the games, and the fans, they said, you got to get this goat out of here. And he said, you know what, forget it. And I'm paraphrasing. He said, forget it. There's no way, and the Cubs are cursed. You will never win a World Series.
Is that
again.
really that curse?
That's where it came from.
Like I said, I don't know anything about sports, but like Boston had the curse of the Bambino, right? Where it was basically they gave the Babe Ruth over to the Yankees.
That's right.
And so I know more than I thought I did.
See?
But so it's a same kind of thing. There was a curse. I didn't know that.
There was a curse upon them, and the last time they won the World Series was 1908. Last time they've been to the World Series was 1945.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's
So there were articles in the Chicago Tribune that were actually talking about there are people that are in retirement homes and they're on their last leg. They're in hospice and they all had their hats on and they're like, this is our last chance. We're just holding on for life to see the Cubs win.
I hate to say it this way though, but maybe they're watching the TV thinking it's all like, you know, they're getting delusional.
Possibly.
There's no way that, oh my God, I'm passing over to the other side. There's no way that this is happening.
It's a movie script at this point.
Wow. All right. Well, very good. Well, listen, we have a really great guest today that we'll be talking to him in a second. It's Jon Wax from American West NHD Reports. That's NHD as in Natural Hazard Disclosures. We'll be going over what NHDs cover, how they impact the buyer and the seller. What the hell are they even for in the first place? But before we get started, as usual, Ron, I think you have some news that you wanted to go over, some real estate news.
I do. You know, so Tom and I, we are part of various Facebook groups, and in this particular one, it was an industry group that's on Facebook. And Business Insider had published a article that says shadow banks, quote unquote, are setting up the next housing crash. So I was looking at it, and I'm like, okay, wait. So first of all, I've heard of shadow inventory, right? So we've heard about shadow inventory.
Let me briefly kind of describe what that was.
Yeah, you do that.
When the crash happened, 2009, 2010, there was a lot of inventory that was basically the banks. They didn't put it on the MLS. They basically let it just kind of sit there and wait for the market to basically catch up with it. Because if they tried to sell it at that time, they'd be taking an incredible hit on it. So basically, it was like homes that didn't even exist. You'd drive by them, you'd see the grass kind of growing high, and you'd go, well, is anybody living there? Actually, it was probably foreclosed on, and the banks just kind of owned it. So that's what shadow inventory was. But now this is something completely different. They're calling it shadow banks.
They're calling it shadow banks. And so what they say, it says, okay, who's doing the lending? More and more non-banks, evocatively called shadow banks, they have now overtaken commercial banks to grab a record slice of government-guaranteed mortgages. And what they're saying is these banks are different. They typically borrow from Wall Street, hedge funds, private investors, or banks to make loans, quickly sell them to mortgages, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And then it goes on and on and on. But what they're doing is they then illustrate, here are the top 10 originators. Shadow banks originated 63% of the mortgages. So what they're saying is that in the past, you had traditional banks, so the retail banks, they generated the majority of the mortgages.
Wells, Bank of America.
Wells, Chase, Bank of America, you walk into one of those banks.
Right.
We talked about this on previous podcasts.
Right.
And you get your Wells loan, right? That's how it's always worked. Well, they're saying because of these mortgage banks, these are shadow banks, right? So they don't follow
Even the name
government.
Is just so
It's so misleading because the actual term for a shadow bank, I looked this up on Investopedia,
Right.
is a shadow banking system refers to the financial intermediaries involved in facilitating creation of credit across global financial system, but whose members are not subject to regulatory oversight. The shadow banking system also refers to unregulated activities by regulated institutions. Okay, this upsets me more because if you think about it, at the end of every single podcast, what am I saying? I'm saying my NMLS ID number, right? So we're highly regulated.
Yeah, you have to
A
follow
mortgage
those rules,
bank
at least.
is highly regulated,
Right.
and we're selling to government entities, Fannie and Freddie, and we are going according to their guidelines. Now, we don't have overlays, which means that we don't have these restrictions on top of those guidelines to protect the banks and everything else, right? So we're just going off of Fannie and Freddie. So the fact that they put our company's name
Kinda
and they
lumped it
tied it
in
all
on it.
together,
Right.
that's just really poor reporting. And that's one of the things that when you mentioned on your discussion, rant, if you will, on the last podcast about you have to be careful of the headlines.
Yeah, right.
Right? You need to make sure that you don't just go off of face value. You need to read further into it.
Right. I mean, because you're going to be, as I said on that podcast, it's the difference between either being guided or being led. And that's really what you want to make sure that you are being guided and that someone isn't just leading you. And let me just go into briefly what bugs me. I am so angry about this article is that it's one of those things where when they think that something's going to come up like a crash or something like that, everybody wants to jump on it. Like first, I said it first. I was the first one. I was the person who told everybody that you shouldn't be doing out in the market. You shouldn't be doing, finding homes or whatever, blah, 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 blah. And this is one of those articles. It is all about fear. It is only about fear. And it's all about getting more readership for their website. And let me explain to you also.
It's almost like clickbait.
It's 100% clickbait.
It is clickbait, so that people they send it around, they share it, and they get more readership and everything else. And it's funny because when I looked at shadow banks, and I'm like, well, what is a shadow bank? What's an example? Payday lenders, pawn shops.
Yeah.
So these are unregulated entities that are out there. But a mortgage bank is not a pawn shop.
Right. And they were lumping them kind of all into that one bag. And shadow, that word, it
sounds Russian.
It sounds malignant. It sounds something like we're the shadow bank. We go under the radar and we do deceptive, horrible things.
Cloak and dagger, weird KGB stuff.
Look, here's the reality of the situation. If you actually, we're always asked the question, are we headed for a crash? It's a totally, after the craziness that we've gone through, it is a completely acceptable, understandable question. Are we going towards a crash? It is my feeling that we are not. And I've told you this time and time again, that if I see one coming, I will let you know. Okay? That is my promise to you. Even if it hurts me, I'm going to tell you that there's going to be a crash. Okay? But here's what I'm looking at. If you look at historical appreciation of homes, you're looking at basically, it usually runs about 3% a year. If we look at it, it's kind of like a straight line on a graph of about a little more than 3%. If we look at that compared to what sales are like right now, home prices are actually under that line. So while everybody's saying that prices are going crazy, we're actually slightly below where we should be at. So is there a crash? I don't see it coming. But I certainly don't think that putting out a post like this on a website helps anything. And if anything, creates an irrational fear that keeps people away from actually finding what are really good deals. I'm out there on the streets, and I'm actually seeing investors still investing. Okay, we have properties that we're having investors still show up, and they're making offers. If they start running for the hills, then you should be starting to run for the hills.
And you know what's really interesting is, so you go on, you read the article, and then you see all the comments.
Yeah.
And these comments, they're by realtors, right?
Yeah.
So, but you can tell who is a strong agent, who is a weak agent, and who is a protector agent.
Right.
The weak agents, they pick up on this stuff and they start to snowball with it. So one of the comments, they said, well, I'm seeing that the Ninja loans are coming back. So I see stated income coming back in with the Fannie and Freddie. That is 100% wrong.
Yeah.
Right? Because Fannie and Freddie, you have to document income. Now, there are stated income loans. Where are they though?
Right.
Right? Where are stated income loans? They are on non-owner occupied or investment properties.
Right.
That's where they are, and they're with private banks, and those banks they're assuming the risk associated with those loans. So the comments, that also is a little,
Right.
It makes me a little fiery about it.
And it's so incendiary too.
It is.
I mean, even from I was joking about this, that the picture that is on the on the
We're gonna post this
story.
article. We'll
post a link to it so you can actually see it and have a laugh. But basically, the picture is of the stadium in Detroit, right? The wherever the Tigers played,
Ford Field,
right, being imploded.
right.
I mean, could
Which
you
has
have
nothing to
anything
do.
that make anything so like, or we're about to, be blown into pieces. You better watch your butts. We're about to be destroyed. And it's just, nothing could be further from the truth. No. So I understand why Ron is so kind of up in arms about this. It was, I think, 100% misleading story. And just, you need to be careful out there, guys. But if you get yourself educated, if you get yourself informed, you can weather the storm and you can find things out there. Just get educated, and nobody's going to lead you in the wrong direction.
That's right. And if they wanted to be more accurate, they could have shown the Bears team this year imploding and instead of Ford Field with Detroit, because Detroit's actually pretty good this year. Chicago Bears, not so much.
Yeah, you lost me at sports.
No problem. We'll have a recap. I'll teach you.
All right. Well, great. Well, we've got a great guest with us today. It's like I said before, it's Jon Wax from America West NHD Reports. He's been in the business for over 22 years. Educating and providing natural hazard disclosure services. He was the affiliate of the year for the Beverly Hills Greater Los Angeles Association of Realtors, or BGLAR, as we affectionately call it in the industry. He's also the affiliate of the year for the Escrow Association of San Gabriel Valley. Nice to have you here, Jon. Thank you so much for coming.
I'm excited. It's wonderful to be here.
Why don't we start off just a little bit kind of background for you about how you got involved in the industry and what how did you come across doing what you do?
I was involved in a transaction with a lender, kind of a friend of mine. And after the Northridge earthquake, he said, you know what, I was talking with a geologist, and I think this is going to be a very important field that we should get involved with. And he started his own NHD company back in 1994, and that's how I got involved with it. And he asked me to come on and start the business and get out the word about how important this information is.
Right. And just so you guys all know that basically an NHD disclosure report is mandatory as part of the transaction in a real estate transaction here in California. So for those of you out in Wisconsin or Illinois, we're going to touch upon what your versions of it possibly are, and we'll discuss that later on. But this is a kind of a very specific California thing because it was kind of a way for basically inform the person who is a potential buyer of real estate of potential hazards that are in his area, that basically, and we'll go into what those things are. But I really want to kind of basically, before we even get started with that, I want to kind of set the stage for when the natural hazard disclosure is introduced into the transaction. Basically, as a buyer, okay, you've had your offer accepted. The earnest money has changed hands, and the inspection period begins. In the residential property agreement contract, that period is 17 days, but you can make it 10 days if you want, to make it, your offer more attractive to the seller. You can even make it 0 days. We don't recommend that, but you could make it 0 days. So you're sitting there and your stomach's in knots. You're worried about what's the process going to be like. What are you going to find out about the house? What secrets are going to be uncovered? And then you get this email. It used to be papers, but now it's an email, and it's the NHD. You open it up, and it says that the house the house has this hazard or that hazard, and you may not even had your home inspection yet. Your knee-jerk reaction is to panic. Oh God, the house is on a fault line, in a fault zone. We need to cancel the deal. But wait, take a deep breath. The NHD is really a great tool. It actually is there to reduce your fear. Remember, anything that increases your knowledge decreases your fear. Before these were required, people had to guess if their homes were in dangerous areas. And if you look at it that way, the more you know, the more confident you're going to be in making your purchase. Right, John? I mean, isn't that a good way to look at it?
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. What I say to agents that I work with is, order it as soon as you get your listing.
Right.
There's no charge to the seller.
Right.
If escrow doesn't close, but the more information you can get and have available to answer any questions and avoid surprises, because surprises cause lawsuits,
right,
that you are able to get to them, then the less chance that there's going to be a stumbling block when you get finally to escrow and close escrow smoothly.
Right, and we'll go a little bit more in depth and a little bit later in the podcast about why you want to get that disclosure taken care of so early in the process if you're a seller, and it really has to do with the deadlines that you have. So we'll go into that in just a minute. But why don't we just go kind of start in the most basic. What is the NHD? And like I said, it's required, but what hazards does it cover?
Okay. The NHD report, or Natural Hazard Disclosure Report, is a report that deals with material facts. Material facts are if it's in a flood zone, is it in a fire zone, is it in an earthquake fault zone, is it in a seismic hazard area. These are all parts of the NHD report. The requirement is state-level information. However, most companies, including ours, provides local information, because if there's ever a discrepancy between the two, the local information will be ruled to be what is in effect, and the judges will rule towards that information. So you have to have both.
Right. So really briefly, because we can't really go too in depth here, but what go through those different hazards and how are they defined? How are they determined? Okay,
I'll start with fire. There's two. There's the very high fire severity areas, which are areas which are maybe unincorporated or up by the mountain areas, and you're going to have to pay additional fire insurance because of that. This is the ramifications of being in those zones.
Right.
Another one is the state responsibility area. That's the one where if you have a property and there's a dwelling on it, you may pay another $150 extra per year to have that property in there for fire prevention and education. And the state is, and the local fire departments are the ones who are responsible for that fire. You have the very high flood, and those are some are quite sizable. There's one that runs from Prado Dam all the way out to the Long Beach Harbor, and they fan out there. And unfortunately, these can be changed maybe every 6 months, so you do have to get your reports updated, and you do have to get a complete report. There's the dam inundation area, which I just talked about. And the interesting thing is, if there's a 1% chance that 1 foot of water, if the dam broke or there's a torrential rain that would be on that property, that's what they consider these zones to be.
Right.
Okay? And earthquake fault zone, well, there are properties that are already built in that particular area.
Right. I mean, the vast majority of the Los Angeles area is pretty much, a fault zone. I mean, really, right? I mean,
true.
I mean, if you live here, you can expect that the ground is going to shake every once in a while.
We're going to rock and roll. In some places, you're going to rock more than others. But There is no requirement to get additional insurance, although it's highly recommended, and lenders will request that you get it.
Right.
But the state is the best place to get it, because a lot of them are not not insuring properties from independent private insurances. But if they're in there, it doesn't mean that you're going to sustain more damage or whatnot. It just depends on which way that earthquake is moving and rolling. So the Northridge earthquake is an extreme example, because I was living in Tarzana at the time, and there were 3 townhomes, and I was on the end. I was whipped out of bed, came out, and saw in the morning there was a crack going down the middle of the middle one, and you could follow the footprint going across the street towards Santa Monica.
Wow.
So it just depends on where you were. About a mile. I was about a mile away from where the epicenter was.
Right. I was actually sitting on top of it. I was actually in Northridge.
Okay.
And, there was something horrifying about waking up with being slammed against a wall,
You mean
basically.
slammed up.
Right? And then walking out of my front door and looking to the north and seeing the big gas pipe that had split up in Rinaldi and spewed like this tower of flames up in the air. Anyway, sorry. I do every time it was so scarring. Every time that somebody brings up the Northridge earthquake,
Yes.
I go, "Oy."
Well,
Go
it was most recent memory in our general area here in the San Fernando Valley, but there can be homes there. You cannot build on the fault line, and that's where the big issues are. So if there's actual existing property and there's damage to it, you cannot rebuild it. You cannot add on to a property. If it is on the actual trace line, if it's in the fault zone, you can. But there are specific requirements that you have to talk to the city and the local government as far as permits to do what you need to do.
And that's really the difference between the seismic hazard and the fault line, basically, correct?
Well, the seismic goes a little bit further. We're just talking about earthquakes right now.
Right.
Seismic hazard has 2 components. You have landslide,
Okay.
which is a great example when you drive up towards Santa Barbara on the 101.
Right.
You have the La Conchita
Right.
site, where people went down to get their coffee and newspaper, and then the shaking and the upward thrusting caused a heavy saturated hillside to slide down and cover those properties as well as the individuals that were in them. So that was a very sad situation.
It was a horrifying landslide.
Exactly.
I remember that, yeah.
And then an example of liquefaction is you would have to have a high water table, a sandy type material, and an earthquake for all those things. But a good example, I have 2 of them. One of them is going to the beach. You step on the wet sand, and when the water comes in, what happens? You go down.
Right.
Okay? The Nemitz Freeway collapse during the Oakland and Giants World Series.
Right.
That one, what happened is they filled bulkheads and tried to create these beautiful condos. And when the earthquake hit, it removed the bulkheads and the condos as well as the freeway collapsed in on itself.
Wow.
Because it was on sandy type material,
Right.
and it was right there, right at the earthquake center.
Wow.
So these are some of the things that are examples
Right.
of what has to be covered, and it has to be right currently on a state level, although
Right.
the local is very recommended.
Right. So, now we've mentioned those kind of the main required ones. Now, there are the different supplemental things that also are sometimes included in the NHD, correct?
Correct.
So what are those things?
Well, besides a lot of the overlap with the state and the local information, we have additional, like if you drive up the coast, you'll see tsunami warnings.
Right.
So we have to tell you if there's a tsunami.
Right.
Wind bluffs, and if there's high winds and things like that, where the sand can be blown.
Right.
Other things like right to farm.
Right.
Right to farm is another one we have to tell you within a mile.
Right.
Right here in Sylmar, the ongoing mining operation, we have to tell you if you're within a mile of the ongoing mine operation. This is not for gold or gems. This is just strip mining to use it for cement and other types
Right.
of building materials. These are all things that have to be in the report, and we provide that too.
One of my favorite ones that I've seen is the ordnance that there's the possibility, the military ordnance hazard disclosure,
Right.
where basically, they used to lob bombs around there, right?
Well, or buried. The reason why it came in is because where El Toro base is, which is built over now, they did not have it fenced up, and they didn't start to build their second phase, and some kids went across and they dug up 6 inches down a grenade that exploded on,
my God.
and that's where it comes in.
Right.
Anytime there's an issue like that, there's another addition to the report.
Got it.
So these are what's creating that too.
Just as an aside, so in South Carolina where I grew up, in Charleston, from Hurricane Matthew, they actually uncovered, and they had to get a bomb squad for actual cannonballs that washed ashore on the Charleston beach as a result of the hurricane.
I don't know if that would have to be on some sort of hazard. It's sort of,
But still, they had to call the bomb squad. It was kind of crazy.
So it's the different cannonball than jumping into a pool and going cannonball.
Right.
These are the big metal lobbing at the, okay. So now here's the question that I have about the differences between disclosures, right? So we have the natural hazard disclosure report, and there's the TDS, which is supplied by the seller, basically is saying, this is what we know is wrong with the house, basically. Why don't you kind of explain the difference between the two in terms of how is a natural hazard disclosure any different from what the seller has to disclose on their own?
Well, the TDS is based on seller's knowledge. So we're professionals in looking up the information. We get it from governmental sites, federal, state, county, city information, and then we're able to put it and generate a report so that it's understandable for lay people to be able to read the report and find out whether or not there's anything affecting that property where they should be concerned about. And if they have any questions, they should talk to us, the experts, to explain any of those.
Right. Now, we kind of briefly touched on it before about how important it is for as a seller, and I'm talking to you sellers out there because I know you're out there, the sellers, to get the NHD done as soon as possible once they decide to list their home. And why don't you go into kind of some reasons why that is so important? Now, the seller is the person who purchases it, correct?
Correct.
And they get to choose which companies. Now, I want to talk to you guys out there in terms of you have the salesperson agent out there, the SA, salesperson agent, the SA, who basically, look, they've got all sorts of great relationships with people, and their whole thing is about throwing business back and forth to each other. So don't be surprised if you find yourself led. I used the wrong word. Led towards a certain NHD, but as a seller, you have every right to choose whatever NHD company you want to, correct?
Correct. It is up to the seller to provide this information to the buyer. It's written in 1103 of the California Civil Code. However, there is a section in there that says that the seller can choose a company in good faith, and we check a box on the form that says that they haven't reviewed it, read it, or understand it, or read it, and so we take the onus and the responsibility from them regarding anything that's written in the report, so that they're relieved and then they're held harmless regarding the information in the report. But it is up to them to select in good faith the company,
right.
And you have to use a reputable company that's going to also have and other insurances to protect you if there ever is a problem with the report.
I want to go into that a little bit later on, but we'll talk about how you can protect yourself when you do go out there and choose your NHD company. Sure. Here's I wanted to go kind of right now into why it's so important for the seller to get that NHD report done as soon as possible. Okay, so basically, as you're going through the transaction, you, as a seller, want to do whatever you can to shut the door as many times as you can. Whenever there is the inspection contingency is done, you want to make sure that door is shut. You want to make sure that nothing can actually go backwards through the transaction and somehow undo the transaction. If there's an appraisal contingency, okay, we got the appraisal. It's we're good value-wise. They're going to be able to get their loan. Close the door. Thank you very much. We're moving forward. Okay. Now, whenever these mandatory disclosures are not given to the buyer, that opens the door again. Basically, if they, for whatever reason, you don't get the NHD to them until the 23rd day, and they've already given their inspection contingency up, they've already given their whatever contingency up, they can still say, oh no, wait a second, I've got 3 days here that I can review this and still back out. So that's why it's so imperative to make sure that you get this done as soon as humanly possible, correct?
That is correct, and that's why more and more agents are not leaving it up to escrow, because it's not escrow's responsibility to order it. It is the agent and the seller to get the information and provide it to the buyer as soon as possible, exactly because they have the 3-day right to cancel the transaction because of something they find in the report. In most cases, once they have the report, they give it to the other side, they briefly look at it, they sign off on it, you've relieved yourself of any liability, and you've met your requirement to provide the disclosures.
Right. So once again, this is one of those key things for the sellers. Make sure that you choose, and we'll go into the ways that you choose a really good NHD company, and then we're also going to basically I want to make sure I emphasize this: get it to the buyer as soon as you possibly can, as soon as the earnest money is in. That should be one of the first thing that goes back over to the buyer. Also, let me step a little bit back here and talk about another thing that's on the report. You do disclose Melrose, right?
Correct.
Okay, so Melrose, to go into very briefly what Melrose is basically if, let's say, a community wants to forego getting approval for like a new park or something like that, or a new infrastructure thing, they'll basically go, well, what we're going to do is we're going to do an assessment on this community that basically pays for it, and then they pay it off over the course of 40 whatever years. Correct, right?
Correct.
So, and it's up to the NHD to basically let you know not only that there is a Melrose, but also how much it is, correct? Or
well, it's a little more detailed than that.
Yeah, go into that.
Basically, what Melrose is that they want to create a self-sufficient community and district, that they do want to have a self-sufficient infrastructure.
Right.
It had to be voted in on a 2/3 vote.
Right.
And once that passes, they create the different, and then they do it usually in phases.
Right.
And an example or another name for Melrose is a community facility district.
Right.
Another, and you have to report it in a certain way. You can't just say yes there is or no there isn't. You have to give them more detail, like the facility, the purpose, the beginning and ending date, and some of these are 60 years.
Yeah.
So they are expanding that as well, and what the amount of the current tax is, and what is the amount of the maximum tax could be, based on a 2% escalator. It doesn't usually go up 2%, but it can go up 2% a year.
Right. And what kind of surprised me was when I first, got into NHDs and all that, was that I didn't think of this as a hazard. You know what I mean? It's like, well, I didn't know that this was part of what's included in all this. And I want to make sure that that's, if you are living in a district that has that Melrose, that when you do choose an NHD company, that is something that they're on top of.
Correct. I mean, if you don't, you're getting a disservice, because we're not regulated on how we report this information.
Right.
You've got to choose a company that will provide all that information as well as have your back. And there's one little thing that we wanted to add on there is there's 1915 bond districts that have the same requirement of being disclosed. They have the same for infrastructures, and it's usually because there were like 4 farms and they needed to have work done out there, so they voted it in, and now there are homes in there, now they're not farms. And so back in the year 1915, if work needs to be done and it could be $15, they can go into accelerated foreclosure.
Yeah. Right.
Within 90 days, just like Melrose. It's not 5 years like property taxes. They have to know how much it is and get it paid usually by the end of escrow, so they're not going to have that kind of problem.
Right.
Just to jump in really quick, so we're talking about Melrose, and the properties I've seen with Melrose are Valencia, Santa Clarita, up in the North Valley. And what's interesting, and I think we have to talk about, is the fact that Melrose is essentially it's almost double your property taxes.
Yeah.
Right. So why is that important? Well, you want to know if you're going to be paying double your property taxes,
right.
But also it can affect your qualification. So if you're right there on the border and you're expecting your property taxes to be 1.25% of the purchase price, but now it's 2.5%, then that's something you got to pay attention to. And that's, if you're looking at homes specifically that have Melrose, then you need to make sure that the lender is involved in that conversation so that you don't get priced out.
Right. And so that's so important in terms of when you're a buyer, not only looking at, okay, what dangers am I possibly, is this home potentially in? But on top of it, that information is incredibly important to Ron and making sure that he's in that loop, or whoever your lender is. So, but let's hop back over the seller again. So I'm about to list my home. What should I be looking for in terms of a competent, well organized NHD company?
You're looking for a company that it definitely has E&O insurance. Obviously, we couldn't do the business without it. Mm-hmm. Not that we're looking.
That stands for errors and omissions.
Yes,
just
errors
so
and
you guys know.
right, errors and omissions, and so that you're protected if there ever is a problem with it. You want to have somebody in the office to answer any questions that would come up in the process of something that's in the report. You want to be with the company that has a track record, that has done this and has the experience. My company has over 100 years of experience. We're the same company that started a title company, NHD business, about 13 years ago, and just decided to move our own so we can provide other services and not be stuck with what title will allow us to do. So, I mean, these are some of the reasons why we moved on our own. But you want somebody there as part of your team.
Right.
And have your back whenever there's an issue or you need to provide the report information.
So important. Yeah, absolutely. And, some other things that, I'd also recommend looking for is, you can find this information online and all that. Have there been lawsuits against this company? Sometimes you'll see that online. Be looking to see if there's lawsuits. Another weird one I saw was watch out for the names that change. Like what happens is they get a really bad reputation, and then all of a sudden overnight their name changes. So, had they changed their name in the last 5 to 10 years is another thing to kind of be on the guard for. Correct? I mean,
that's true. That's true. And then be on the lookout for, are these people updating their information on a regular basis? We happen to update it as soon as it comes available. We're tied in with that.
Yeah, I was about to ask you about that in terms of, so how do you guys get updated on all this information? How does the information flow to you guys so that you can kind of compile it and give it to?
We're in contact with all the top people that have the access to the information. Anyone can get the information. It depends on how they disclose it. There was a huge lawsuit not too long ago against the title company, NHD company, that was using state-level information even though there was local information, and they did not provide it.
So they were found negligent because they weren't providing that.
Exactly. And then when they went to a different, and they had another report run, it found out it was another, and it happened to be in flood zone. They said there was no flood zone. It wasn't a flood zone. They checked out another provider, and they found out it was in a flood zone. And so that was a big issue. But like I said, if there's anything in the report, you want a company that's going to immediately look into it and have your back as far as any of the information.
Another little brief step back in terms of what are the differences between advisories and site-specific disclosures?
Okay. The determinations are specific to a property. An advisory is a general area. So it's specific to a general area, and an advisory can be for the whole state or that general region.
Right.
Versus it's in or out a flood zone, in or out a fire zone.
And I'm sure that that's one of those things that you really want to specifically look to make sure that your NHD covers those. It does get that granular, that it does get to the site-specific stuff, correct? Because if it's a difference between a state and a local, you certainly, if they can go even deeper into the site-specific, that's even better, correct?
Absolutely. But like I told you before, that you have to look to the local a lot of times, just like the judges, to find out whether or not this is going to affect the property. And if it's in it, then it's going to actually affect this buyer, and they're going to rule in favor of the local information.
Right. So this is kind of a curveball here, but put yourself in the shoes of a new buyer, and you get these kind of hazard, advisories or whatever. What is your kind of impression on how to approach it? How do you, what things should they, really look at and go, oh no, maybe we shouldn't do this? Are there things that are red flags that you would compare to other things, or?
I don't think you should be afraid of it at all.
Right.
I think this
I
is
agree.
just an informational thing, and you should look to find out how is it going to affect? Is it going to cost the buyer additional monies because it happens to be in a flood zone, a very high fire zone? But it's not anything to be afraid of. If you really like the property,
right,
then you will be able to go for it and get the deal closed.
Yeah.
There are ways around, like flood zones and things like that. Very high fire flood zones. Is because there are land surveyors that can actually go to the property, because we don't actually go to the property,
right,
and they do flood elevation certificates. And if they're in a flood zone, lenders are requiring them to get the flood certificates.
Got it.
And basically can alleviate maybe half or all of the flood insurance, additional flood insurance they would have to get,
right,
just by having them come out. Granada Hills is an example. It's up in the hills,
yeah,
but you're working off of flat maps. The same maps that we have are the same maps the lenders have, and he looks at it and he goes, oh no, this is very low risk. It's 6 feet above a flood zone, and so this should not be
right,
as high of a premium,
right,
as it is stated on there.
Right.
Okay. And so these are some of the things that we can help you out with, and you need to be educated on in order to see how you can transact that, in the business.
And one of the things that I kind of want to bring up here as well is in terms of what I also recommend for my buyers as well is when whether it's natural hazards or whether or not you're 20 miles away from your nearest grocery store or whatever, whenever you hear these things, you have to not only think about, okay, can I live with this, even though I love this house and all that,
mm-hmm,
but in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, you're going to be selling that house. So you also have to consider what the person you're going to sell that house to is going to think about that. If you hear that you're in a crazy, fault area or something like that, you might be perfectly fine with it, but remember, somebody else is going to be buying that house eventually, probably. You know what I mean? So that's when I want to make sure that all your buyers also kind of consider that as well. You shouldn't be afraid, like John says. Absolutely, 110%. You should not be afraid of this. But also, it should be that thing that's in the back of your mind that it could be something that you need to overcome a little bit later on. Right.
That's possible too, But again, it depends on the buyer's motivation. And some buy a house and they want to live in it forever.
Yeah.
If they're in there and they want to live in it for a few years, that's probably more important that they know exactly. Hey,
Absolutely.
Where am I involved?
If this is your forever house, you're going to deal with it a lot differently than if look, if you're newlyweds and you're going to have 3+ kids and you're going to need to grow, then you're going to sell your house in 5 to 10 years. So it's just for those people, that's probably the more who's going to be making those considerations.
Right, the right house for the right person.
Right, exactly. Great. And now I wanted to also, before we go, I'm not sure how far-reaching this podcast is going to be, even though I am a California licensed real estate agent and my office is based here in Los Angeles and in the San Fernando Valley. What, if anything, do you know of out there that is like the NHD in other states?
California is the only state that requires natural hazard disclosure as part of the transaction, and it cannot be waived.
Right.
And you have to have an NHD and the tax report. In certain states, some of them require environmental reports. We can add an environmental report, and the more information you provide to the parties, the less chance they're going to come back and say, you didn't tell me that. Now we have a problem.
Right.
And you want to avoid problems. So, like I said, there's no such thing as under-disclosing and as getting as much information out there. And some states require flood certificates on everything. So it just depends on where you are. But California is the most strict and stringent regarding this. And they must have a natural hazard and tax report on every transaction, even commercial.
Right.
Okay, some form of a natural hazard disclosure report.
Right. Great. Well, Jon, thank you so much for coming.
You're very welcome.
Appreciate it. Giving us a little glimpse behind the curtain of the NHD world. So why don't you go ahead and give the folks your information in terms of like where they can contact you if they have questions for you.
Jon Wax, JONWAX. I'm at 818-915-3344, or you can email me at jwax@awestres.com. And it was a pleasure.
Great. Well, Jon, thank you so much for coming. I really do appreciate it. Really.
And I thank you.
If you folks have any other questions, we can definitely get in touch with Jon and ask for you. Don't hesitate to leave a comment or question for us on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Clarified Realty Podcast, all one word. You can even email me directly at tom@clarifiedrealty.com. For more exclusive bonus content and advice between episodes, please check out our website, www.clarifiedrealty.com. I am on Snapchat, Twitter, and Instagram as well. My handle for all three of those are @ClarifiedRealty. I always say, I beg of you, come on, guys, please, please, please leave feedback and reviews on iTunes or in the comment section on our page. My amazing theme song, Hey Now, is from the band Wolf. That's Wolf with 2 Fs. And please go check them out and like them on SoundCloud. We'll also leave a link to the song in the credits if we can. They rock so hard, even Beethoven could hear how freaking awesome they are. And I remember he was stone cold deaf, for Christ's sake. And just a little disclaimer, Ron and I are licensed by the California Bureau of Real Estate. My license number is 01715353. Ron's is
Guaranteed rate, NMLS ID 2611, NMLS ID 558706, California.
The advice we give is only for properties located in the state of California. For all other states, please contact your local real estate agent or real estate professional. And that's about it. Ron, you good?
I'm fantastic.
Great. Well, thanks for coming, everybody. And remember, the greatest thing you can ever do is make someone feel at home. Take care, and we'll see you next week.
What you gonna do with your